What's going on, everybody? Seminary Covey here for another Berean review. And guess who we're reviewing? That's right, Pastor Mike. Gift that keeps on giving. He, in this same live that he did last night, he mentioned something that I don't know if even he would agree with, but he's on a tirade right now. He's trying to do damage control, and he's just saying whatever it seems like. But I want to look at something specifically that he was talking about. The topic of conversation was, number one, to trash Covey, and number two, asking the question of, does early African Christianity prove Catholicism? And he went to what some of the church fathers thought, and I thought it was very interesting whenever he brought up Augustine. So I want to look at something that he said in regarding Augustine. Watch this video with me.
From the authoritative, this is how we know Augustine held to what we would call Sola Scriptura, right?
So number one, apparently Augustine would have held to Sola Scriptura. That is a anachronism. It's throwing a category back into a time where it does not belong. They didn't have the same view as what would be considered scripture to them. There were different levels, and they incorporated all of them. Though, so to say he would have been Sola Scriptura is an anachronism and an oversimplistic view of what he really saw. But again, Mike does that. Let's just keep going.
That scripture is the primary authority. He says, from the authoritative canonical books of the Old and New Testaments. The
authoritative books of the Old and New Testament. The authoritative canonical books of the Old and New Testament. Let's keep going.
Authority of these books has come down to us from the apostles through the succession of bishops. So the books have come down, not the writings of the bishops. Because again, remember,
the authority of these books have come down to us by the apostles, he says. By the apostles. These books that he held, that Augustine held Sola to, they came down from the apostles. He didn't make them up.
Himself is a bishop, and he himself is saying that what we write can be wrong. But he's basically saying that God used the church, men in the church, to be the librarians of the writings that were authoritative.
He's saying that God used the church, or the men in the church, to be the librarians of these authoritative canonical books. So the apostles handed down these authoritative books. How would they have it doesn't matter. These apostles handed down these authoritative books, which were given to the church. The church then entrusted them to the church fathers to act as sort of librarians of these books, and they didn't make any of this up. They are going by what the apostles gave to them, and they are just the librarians of it. They just held to it. So let's see if he has anything else to say regarding this.
He wasn't trying to say that the bishop's words are authoritative. And from a position of lofty supremacy, claims the submission of every faithful and pious mind.
He actually stops here. He talks about some other stuff, but what I really want to deal with is what he said about Augustine and the canon and the authority of books. And so I just want to see one more time before we get into something. Let's view that one more time. Let's bring it back one more time, Pastor Mike.
Basically saying that God used the church, men in the church, to be the librarians of the writings that were authoritative.
God used the church, the men in the church, to be the sort of librarians for the books of the canon that were considered authoritative. My question is, what are those books of the canon? What scriptura is it that Augustine would have held Sola to? Well, let's go ahead and look at it. This comes from Augustine's Christian Doctrines, chapter 8 on the canonical books. Hope y'all can see this. I'm going to read a little bit so we can get some background, and then we'll get into the books that he says. He says, but let us now go back to consider the third step here mentioned. For it is about it that I have set myself to speak and reason as the Lord shall grant me wisdom. The most skillful interpreter of the sacred writings then will be he who in the first place has read them all and retained them in his knowledge, if not yet with full understanding, still with such knowledge as reading gives. Those of them, at least those are called canonical. For he will read the others with greater safety when built up in the belief of the truth, so that they will not take his first possession of a weak mind, nor cheating with dangerous falsehoods and delusions, fill it with prejudices adverse to sound understanding. Now, in regards to the canonical scriptures, we must follow the judgment of the greater number of the Catholic churches, and among these, of course, a high place must be given to such as have been thought worthy to be at the seat of the apostle and to receive epistles. So we are to receive these authoritative canonical books from the Catholic churches among us. What did Mike say? You said something like that, didn't you, Mike? What did you say?
But he's basically saying that God used the church, men in the church, to be the librarians of the writings that were authoritative.
That's what I thought you said. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so he's saying what Augustine said. The canonical books that were considered authoritative were passed down by the apostles, given to the church or the men in the church to be the librarians, and then we should receive those books. So let's go down a little bit and let's see what those books are that should be received. Let's see if we can maintain some level of consistency here. We're going to use Augustine to say that we should hold these books as authoritative and not any of our words, just these books that were handed down by the apostles and entrusted to the church, given to the fathers for us and for our benefit. So let's see what these books are. Now, the whole canon of Scripture on which they say this judgment is to be exercised is contained in the following books. Here it is, the moment you've been waiting for. The 5 books of Moses, that is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, 1 book of Joshua, the son of Nun, 1 of Judges, 1 short book called Ruth, which seems rather to belong to the beginning of Kings. Next, 4 books of Kings and 2 of Chronicles. So far, so good. These last not following one another, but running parallel, so to speak, and going over the same ground. The books now mentioned are history, which contain a connected narrative of the times and follows the order of the events. There are other books which seem to follow no regular order and are connected neither with the order of the preceding books nor with one another, such as Job, Tobias, which is Tobit, oh my gosh, and Esther and Judith, oh my gosh, and the 2 books of the Maccabees. That's crazy. That's not what Mike holds to, but Mike says we should follow Augustine, and what he says is I don't know. Let's keep going because I'm getting confused. And the 2 of Ezra, which is Ezra and Nehemiah, which last look more like a sequel to the continuous regular history in which terminates the book of Kings and Chronicles. Next are the prophets, in which there is 1 book of the Psalms of David and 3 books of Solomon, vis-a-vis Proverbs, Song of Song, and Ecclesiastes. For 2 books, one called Wisdom and the other called Ecclesiasticus, are ascribed to Solomon from a certain resemblance of style, but are most likely but the most likely opinion is they were written by Jesus, the son of Sirach. Now, it does say in the footnote that Augustine, in his retractions, withdrew his opinion so far as to regards the book of wisdom. But there is still Ecclesiasticus, Tobit, Judith, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees. He then goes on to talk about the books of the prophets, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Then he gets into 4 greater prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Daniel. Now, we see that the books that Augustine is citing are not the books that Mike adheres to. I mean, a lot of them are, but there are some that Mike would say, no, that's Catholic doctrine. That's Catholic doctrine. They just trying to drag us to the Pope. I guess Augustine's trying to drag us to the Pope too, huh? He wants us to be under that magisterium. Oh my God. Okay, so let's keep reading. Let's see what he says here. The authority of the Old Testament is contained within the limits of these 44 books. This is the authority. This is the canonical authority that was given to the Catholic Church by the apostles, handed down to the church fathers for our benefit. And they have books in here like Tobit, Judith, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and Sirach. No, not Sirach. Ecclesiastes and Wisdom of Solomon, which, like I said, later on he went back to withdrew wisdom, but there's still other books in here that are part of the Apocrypha that we are told is Catholic doctrine and not to adhere to because there's inconsistencies and this and that or whatever. But Mike said that if anyone, what did he say about the inconsistencies? Mike said that if anyone sees that there's inconsistencies or something incorrect in these books, that's their fault, not the books. Where's that at?
If we are perplexed by an apparent contradiction in Scripture, it is not allowable to say the author of this book is mistaken. But either the manuscript is faulty or the translation is wrong or you have not understood. And I'll stop right there. I'll put the link in.
So according to Mike, He's saying that Augustine is saying that if you think there's an issue with one of these books, the problem is with you. It's not with Scripture. So what is it that Augustine considers Scripture? Tobit, Judith, First and Second Maccabees, Ecclesiastes, and a Wisdom of Solomon, which again, he withdrew wisdom. So we'll just go with Ecclesiastes. I've heard Mike say, no, there's issues in those books, bro. There's issues in Tobit. There's issues in Judith. There's issues in the Maccabees. Augustine says he can't do that. And Mike says that you should listen to Augustine, that you can't do that. But Mike is violating what it is Augustine said. This is to me, this is inconsistent at best, and more than likely hypocrisy. But I just wanted to bring this out to show that, I don't know, he's going off lately. He's saying some wild things, and they're not really making sense when you really look at it. I don't know how on one hand we're supposed to be sola scriptura, how Augustine was, but not adhere to the scriptura that Augustine was sola too. I don't understand how he says that Augustine says that we can't even question these books when Mike himself questions those books. I don't understand how the apostles handed down these authoritative canonical books to be passed down by the church, by which the church fathers were the librarians of, and Mike says, no, we're going to get rid of them anyways. I don't know. The only conclusion is maybe Augustine was just trying to drag us to the papacy. He was trying to drag us under that magisterium. He's got Catholic doctrine. We got to correct Augustine. He's got Catholic doctrine. I don't know. We'll see you next time on another Berean Review.